David Ferrie was a very unusual figure in New Orleans. This was true even before any of these events occurred. He led a troop of young cadets of something called the Civil Air Patrol. He was homosexual. He was a CIA contract pilot going into Cuba, and I don't know whether he burnt down sugarcane fields or dropped leaflets or exfiltrated and infiltrated people, but he was involved in these flights to Cuba. And he was also involved on the okay of Bobby Kennedy in anti-Castro activities. Now, Oswald had been a member of that CAP, Civil Air Patrol group, when he was a teenager. And so he knew Ferrie from way back. Now, when the assassination occurs in November of 1963, Jack Martin, who was this hanger-on, very mysterious figure with so many connections in high places, tells everyone in New Orleans who will listen, that David Ferrie knew Oswald. Now, because remember that in Dallas, Oswald has been arrested. Now Martin is saying, Ferrie knew him. How could this be? So Jim Garrison immediately tries to get Ferrie, and succeeds finally on the Monday morning. President Kennedy was killed on a Friday. On the Monday morning, gets Ferrie into the office, and Ferrie denies that he ever knew Oswald. Then Ferrie wanders around New Orleans and he asks about his library card. Did Oswald have his library card? Do you know whether Oswald, he went to Oswald's landlord, or where's the library? Well, if Ferrie did not know Oswald, how could Oswald have had his library card? And it seems pretty clear that when Oswald was questioned and the Dallas police headquarters, a record of which there's no written record or anything, he must have had that library card with him, because otherwise he must have had Ferrie's library card. Now, Jack Martin then goes around, and also later when Garrison begins his investigation again, he calls in Jack Martin, the original person who said that Ferrie knew Oswald, and Jack Martin says that there's a photograph of Oswald and Ferrie together at a CAP, Civil Air Patrol, cookout. And several people have used it. John Ciravolo was the cadet whose friend took the picture. Ciravolo's actually in the picture. And there are Ferrie and Oswald together at the cookout. So just what Jack Martin said turns out to be true. So since Ferrie knew Oswald, we shouldn't be surprised that when Clay Shaw for the CIA takes Oswald around Louisiana, Ferrie is there as well. Ferrie has helped. And I found other witnesses as well to Ferrie's close relationship. Ferrie and Oswald spent the last night together before Oswald went off to so-called defect to the Soviet Union. Now, David Ferrie was Garrison's chief suspect for involvement in the conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. And then a terrible thing happened in February of 1967. Just as Garrison's investigation was gaining momentum, Ferrie dies. And it's very interesting that Bobby Kennedy telephoned the office of the home, actually, of the coroner, Nicholas Chetta, and asked what was the cause of death of David Ferrie. Now, why is Bobby Kennedy asking about Ferrie's cause of death? So we can see that Ferrie's claims, and he had a young man working with him named Leighton Martins, and Ferrie was dead. I spoke to Leighton Martins, and he said that that is he and Ferrie, had letters of marque from Bobby Kennedy, which meant that Bobby Kennedy was endorsing whatever they did in their anti-Castro activities.
Actually, right?
David Ferrie was very nervous. His name appeared in the newspapers when the news of that Garrison was investigating the Kennedy assassination broke. And Ferrie was extremely nervous, and eventually he calls and he says he wants to talk. And he called Lou Ivan at home on a Sunday afternoon, and Ivan left. First he went to Jim Garrison's home, and then he went and he got Ferrie. They went to the Fontainebleau Motor Hotel, where, ironically, Pershing Gervais hung out, and they went to a hotel room, and Ferrie began to talk. And he told Ivan that, yes, he was with the CIA, Shaw was with the CIA, and so forth. And he was beginning to tell. And then what happened was that Louis went out and he put one of his police underlings in charge, and this police underling went out to get a pack of cigarettes. Big smoking went on down there, and Ferrie runs away. And he's wandering around the streets, and a few days later he's dead. Ivan didn't want to have the office type up his notes. This was too important, and so he gave them to Jim Garrison. The notes have disappeared. when I interviewed Ivan, he said, can you find those notes? Try to find the notes. And of course I tried to find the notes and I couldn't. Clay Shaw always denied that he knew David Ferrie. We have all those witnesses in Clinton and Jackson that saw them together. But then I discovered another piece of evidence, and it came from a police officer in Kenner named Roger Johnston. And one wouldn't ordinarily believe something like this, except that what happened was this. There was a loan officer named Herbert Wagner. We know that Ferrie knew Herbert Wagner. We know, and I found out, by the way, we didn't know, from Wagner's daughter, Sheila, that Wagner was a CIA asset himself. Now, one day, Roger Johnston knew Herbert Wagner, and they're sitting together, and Wagner opens a file drawer in his office, and there's a file way in the back, and it was a loan application that Ferrie had made out, and Ferrie had borrowed money from Wagner in the past, and Wagner showed it to Johnston and said, do you think I should tell Jim Garrison about this? And this was obviously in 1967, after Clay Shaw was arrested, and what it was Clay Shaw co-signing this loan application for David Ferrie. Johnston saw it with his own eyes, and there it was, the proof, more proof. Not only that, it also proved that, because it was involved with an airplane, that Ferrie was flying to Dallas. Ferrie had told the FBI and the Secret Service that he hadn't been in Dallas 8 to 10 years. Yet here we have Ferrie in shortly before the assassination. What is he doing? Flying into Dallas. Is he going there to see Lee Harvey Oswald, as Don DeLillo imagined in his novel Libra? We don't know. So meanwhile, we have this association. Now, I tried my darndest to find that piece of paper. Herbert Wagner had died, alas. I liked Roger Johnston as a witness. He was a police officer. He had no reason. Where would he have come up with this? And I went to Herbert Wagner's daughter, and she had some of her father's papers in a garage. But her mother had thrown out a lot of them. And we never could come up with that loan application. Why Ferrie needed a loan? This I don't know. All I know is he was there and he asked for that loan. And this is further corroboration, not of Ferrie going to Dallas. And by the way, I also found another witness who told me that Ferrie had flown to Dallas that week before the assassination. And that was a friend of David Ferrie's named John Wilson. John Wilson and his brother Benton were close friends of David Ferrie. And Ferrie told him he was going to Dallas. And they said, well, what are you going there for? And he said, big game hunting, big game. Now, John Wilson, again, he had no interest in Oswald, Kennedy. He was no leftist. He saw Oswald on the street giving out the leaflets, and he says, what's that commie nut doing? And then John Wilson visits David Ferrie's apartment, and he sees Oswald there.